Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 267. Greta, happy Advent.
Oh, thank you. Happy Advent to you as well.
Thank you.
It's kind of crazy that it's that time of year already again.
It always feels crazy when it comes to be this time of year.
Crazy. And I always feel like I'm scrambling to get my Advent stuff together. Like most notably the Advent wreath candles. For some reason, I just cannot stay on top of that. I don't know why, but
ironically, Advent just always seems to fall at a time that's less than advantageous.
Oh, did you just now think of that?
I kind of canned that one. I thought of it a little while ago, and I was like, got to roll that one out.
Yeah, it is a little odd timing. You're right. You're right. It's just right on the heels of Thanksgiving, and you kind of get tied up with all of that planning and cooking and traveling and whatnot. And then you get back into town and, sit down for a minute and you're like,
yeah,
I need to get my Advent wreath candles out.
And
then you find that you don't have any and you have to go to the store. Anyway.
True.
But it's all good. It's all good. I actually love Advent. I think it's a really, really great time of year.
I do too. I very much love Advent. And well, we are actually going to be talking about something that's very appropriate, I think, for Advent, because it's the Father Christmas letters. Something we've never covered on the Tolkien Road. After all these years of doing this podcast, we have not ever done an episode on the Father Christmas letters.
It's a little embarrassing.
Well, sorry.
But, it's okay. Better late than never.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of other stuff to talk about, and this isn't like the main one of the main courses when it comes to Tolkien, but I've been pleasantly surprised and reading through this and preparing this episode and just learning more about them, how enjoyable they really are. Right.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about the background of the Father Christmas letters. We're going to talk about what, like, kind of the generally what's in them, some of the big themes that we see throughout all of the letters, and it's going to be just an education in what these are and why they matter when it comes to studying Tolkien. But yeah, obviously it's the interesting thing for me is that it's not like Tolkien would have thought of this season like we do. It's probably kind of a two-pronged thing, right? As an Englishman of his time, he probably would have thought of it as like, well, it's Christmas upcoming. And obviously as a parent, you're especially like, well, my kids are getting excited for Christmas. And so you think of it as Christmas, but on the like religious practice level, it's, for a Catholic, it's Advent, right? It's the Christmas season actually starts on December 25th, and that's the whole 12 days of Christmas thing. But anyway, it's all, we all just generally think of it as like the Christmas season. Advent's the lead up to Christmas, and Christmas is the season of celebrating Christmas, right? So yeah, that's all of it. I think that's how Tolkien probably would have seen it. And
Advent is preparing for Christmas, and then Christmas is the, celebration of it. And just based on the little, like what I've seen from these letters and the artwork that accompanies them, this is something he probably would have had to start during Advent, because it's not, maybe some of them were kind of a last minute jot down,
right?
But a lot of them, were very thoughtful. You could tell he put a lot of time and thought into them. So I doubt he started this like Christmas Eve.
Well, these were not letters he wrote with the intent of having them published,
right?
At least not that we know of. And the direct intent was obviously to just give to his children, right? But they're so good, they're worth publication, right? So, and maybe not every single one of them is really good. Some of them, it's clear he just kind of like, I forgot to do the Father Christmas letter this year, and kind of jotted it down at the end. But he still put a lot of time into the artwork that went into them, and they're just works of art. Like if you appreciate Tolkien, his creative vision, there's a lot to appreciate in these.
Absolutely.
So anyway, that's a long introduction, longer we've done in a while. Before we get started, we like to give a double up air five to our patrons. All right.
Yeah.
Ready?
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1. Boom.
Get another hand in there. That. Yeah.
Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, Andrew T, John R, Ms. Anonymous, Redhawk, and Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all so much. And a shout out to our newest patron, Michael L.
Michael,
welcome. Air five for you. Three,
Oh, I
three,
was too
2,
anxious.
1. You got 1.5 air fives out of that.
Yeah,
So
see?
there you go. Be like Michael. Michael saved 2 months because he made an annual pledge. And right now, that's just going on right now, right? So through the end of the year. And he's going to get a signed copy of one of my books of his choice for free for doing that.
Nice.
And a new perk I just added that applies to all patrons. When you become a patron, you get 20% off of all merchandise on truemythspress.com, right? So that's like my store where I'm going to be having more merchandise right now. Not a lot over there, but you can get t-shirts, right? So you can get your t-shirt for 20% off, right? Not going to find that deal anywhere but by being a patron of the Tolkien Road. And you can get both of my books for 20%, signed copies of my books for 20% off, right? So all of our patrons get that benefit, get that perk. So and I'm going to be adding more merchandise to that as well. I was just going
to say that. Yep.
Yeah. So I've got
lots of ideas in the works.
I'm really feeling the like creative spirit with all of that. So yeah, go sign up through the end of the year. You can get 2 months free if you make an annual pledge. And if you pledge $5 or more, then you get at least one of my books for free. If you did $10 or more, then you get both of them for free, both signed copies for free. So pretty sweet deal. I think
that is a sweet deal.
Pretty sweet deal.
I agree.
So,
yep.
All right. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes and other podcasting platforms. Help us out over there, right? Help us to keep on ever and on.
Yeah.
And by the way, we need to do our YouTube weekly Tolkien Road Air 5 because we hit 1,000 subscribers. We hit 1,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. Yeah. So we're gonna do this special. Maybe we'll do a double Air 5 since we hit 1,000 subscribers for all our YouTube followers.
Okay,
right?
Let's do
just
it.
To celebrate the 1,000 subscribers.
I think that's worth.
And because we're heading for 1 million next. Heading for 1 million subscribers next. All right, here we go.
Here we go.
3, 2, 1. Oh yes, I feel it.
That was inspired.
Mm-hmm.
That was good.
I just felt a chill go through my body.
I know. Yeah. All the things to come.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about the Father Christmas letters.
Yes, let's.
All right. So what are they? From 1920 to 1943, Tolkien wrote Christmas letters to his children that told stories of Father Christmas, aka Santa Claus. Maybe there's different cultures. You tend to have like kind of different versions of the whole Santa Claus myth. In America, we call him Santa Claus. In England, they call him Father Christmas. And there's some interesting things that even like Tolkien kind of develops his own mythology around all of that too. It's not Saint Nicholas in Tolkien's world, right? Saint Nicholas is different from Father Christmas, although Father Christmas kind of looks back to Saint Nicholas, and there's talk about that in one of the letters. Anyway, a little divergence. These were first compiled by Bailey Tolkien, Christopher's second wife, and published in 1976. And then a more complete edition was published in the late 1990s. So right here, I've got the first edition that was published back in 1976. Right here, Greta got that for me a couple of years ago for Christmas. So, and that's some of Tolkien's artwork right there. So that's the Aurora Borealis, right? That he's showing there. And there's Father Christmas right there looking at the North Pole. So
yeah. Let me ask a quick question if you don't mind. Because I always get tripped up on the timeline of Tolkien's writings.
Sure.
Where did this occur? Like with regards to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, did these like in 1920? Had he published anything?
No.
Okay.
In fact, The Hobbit wasn't published until late in the Father Christmas letters timeline, right? Because so The Hobbit was published in 1937.
Okay.
And these letters, so there had already been 16 or 17 years of Father Christmas letters.
So is this like one of the first things that he would have done?
Yeah, this is very on in like his creative, very, very early on in his creative life.
Okay.
I would say.
Okay. Cool.
The Hobbit, he hadn't even dreamed of Hobbit, like thought up the term Hobbit when he began writing these letters, right? So it was a distant thing on the horizon.
Okay.
So now he had begun writing the stories of Middle Earth because as we know from the history of Middle Earth, that goes back to like even before 1920, right? So the Book of Lost Tales, those first stories that we would come to eventually know as the Silmarillion do predate this, but those didn't actually come into the form that we really know them until much later. Okay. So
gotcha.
So So, and that's a great question because I feel like that's one of the themes of this, but we'll come back to that. All right. It's kind of the historical, sort of the literary, historical value of this. I feel like it's one of the values of this. But these are, and actually let me make one more note on that because I don't think I'll remember to come back to this. 1976. So this was actually published posthumously, but it was published before the Silmarillion. So this would have been like one of the first things published after his death, right? One of his first works published after his death.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so glad they were saved.
I am too. These things are really awesome.
Really are.
All right. So the Tolkien children. So there were 4 Tolkien children. The eldest, John, he was born in 1917. So he would have been 3 when the first letter from Father Christmas arrived in 1920. Michael was born in 1920. Christopher was born in 1924. And then Priscilla was born in 1929. So one of the other things we're going to see is that it's interesting to watch like kind of this in terms of like family history too. And seeing like, at first they're addressed to John, and then Michael comes into the mix, and then Christopher comes into the mix. And then before too long, like Priscilla starts to come into the mix, but right around that time too, John is outgrowing the letters, right? So he's gotten past it. And one other thing is that like, I think these were written in response to the letters that the kids themselves would send to Father Christmas, right? So it was kind of, this was a game he was playing, right, with his kids, right? It was a fun little like kind of make believe game that he was playing with them, responding to their letters to Santa, saying like, this is what I want for Christmas, right? I would just say that the biggest treasure, in my opinion, of all of this, and this isn't the only treasure, but I think the biggest treasure would be just the display of Tolkien's artistic style. I have told you all before how much I love his style, and it's not high art or anything like that, but it's just it's so unique. It is so unique, and it's the style of somebody who is not like a world-class artist, but they just love drawing. They love putting these things down, getting them down as they see them in their mind's eye.
He does a pretty good job. I mean, I'm someone that can't hardly draw a stick figure, so not that my standards are super high, but I mean, I think they're very well done.
Yeah.
Very well done. Yeah.
No, for sure. And so I would highly recommend picking up a copy of the Father Christmas letters just so you can see some of the artwork. I'm going to see if we can share some of the artwork on, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and try sharing my screen here, and we'll see how this all pans out so that you all can check it out on YouTube. So let me do this, share. There we go. Boom. So you guys should be able to see that now. We're up here, I think, in the corner somewhere.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's one. I think this is the very first Father Christmas letter from 1920. I believe that's a drawing that was included in there. So this is how Tolkien envisioned, Father Christmas, and there's Father Christmas's house at the North Pole. And this was what was sent to John, who was only 3 years old that first year. So, I mean, it's not the kind of style that you're going to say like, wow, that's just amazing. But at the same time it is, I don't know. Like his style, like it's so unique. And it maybe the right term is to say that it's not like he was a professionally trained, like, I don't know what how would you term it? Like, what's the right way of terming it?
It is tough because I agree. Like, it's not like professional, but it's also not doodles either.
Right.
I mean, there's like, you could tell it's just very well thought out, and there's a lot of attention to detail, and there's just something very whimsical about it. Like I kind of want to step into that picture and be a part of that.
It feels kind of like, when you hear like these like songs that like win Grammys or something like that, and it's like, well, a profession, like it was professionally put together, and this sort
like
of
with
thing.
The production,
or you see like a movie that wins an Oscar and it's just exquisite, it's this work of art and everything. And and then you see somebody who's like made an indie film, or somebody like some indie songwriter who just writes songs, and they're not like they're not the kind of songs that you're going to hear on the radio, but they're like, you just listen to it and you're like, these are really good songs.
I think that's a great analogy. Yeah.
They're not made with the mindset of like, I'm going to write the greatest thing ever, but there's still high quality to them.
Yeah.
So,
and there's like a purity about it too, where it just hasn't been, it hasn't been filtered or brushed over or anything like that. There's something really real,
right,
and personal about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate his artwork, and that's one of the big things for me about this, about reading these Father Christmas letters. They even include the envelopes, so the envelopes were saved.
So he must have drawn those stamps too,
I think so.
right?
I was just realizing that. Yeah. I think he drew the stamps.
Yeah. Because I don't think you could buy stamps that looks like that.
Right. Well, they wouldn't have actually mailed.
They wouldn't have actually mailed it. They have just put it in the mailbox or something.
Edith, probably was like, "Oh, John, let's, write a letter to Father Christmas, and we're going to mail it." Right. And he put it in the mailbox, and then, she gives it to her hubby, and, and he like reads it and then writes back. So
with this first one, with John only being 3, he wouldn't have been able to actually write the letter. So I'm wondering if it was, I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but I'm wondering if it was something that like he dictated to his mom and his mom wrote it, or if maybe Tolkien started this himself.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, because a 3-year-old, it wouldn't be his idea to write. I don't know. Maybe he's an advanced 3-year-old.
I don't know. And this book is not like the history of Middle Earth. It's not like it's got a bunch of like footnotes and all these like explanations for these. It doesn't give that same quality of textual history. It's much more meant to be, I think, just like a book you could give to your kids that's like in these enjoyable, but it's at the same time, it obviously shows the letters and is geared towards, and it shows them as is. So it's not like they edited them to be like, take these letters that weren't originally meant to be published in order to make a more cohesive story out of them. They publish them as is. They show the artwork. So it's an artifact kind of quality to it, but they also, I think, wanted it to be marketable to kids,
for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Like is a just a fun Christmas thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the envelope for the 1921. And here's a little sample of what the letters actually looked like. So they do transcribe the letters in normal text so that they're easy to read what was said.
Not in the new edition, right? Because I don't think in that first edition they do. Do they?
Did they not? Because I based all this on my research in the second edition.
It is very helpful that they have them written out like in normal. Oh yeah, they do. Okay, yeah. I forgot.
But not all of them are published in the first edition either.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's 1920. You can kind of see one of the hallmarks of Father Christmas's writing is that it's always shaky. Right. So you see all the squiggly lines and everything.
Because he's old and cold.
Yes, exactly. Old and cold.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So
even the letters themselves are works of art. I think it's so fun.
He's got the little holly up there,
Yep.
For sure. All right. So that's just a little sample right there. And actually from 1920, we don't have any letters from 1921 or 1922.
I hadn't noticed
they aren't actually in there. So it skips from 1920 to 1923. Again, 1923, Michael would have been 3 years old at the time, but it's just to Master John Francis here. Is there another one because sometimes they were separate. No, okay, not yet. So it was just John, the eldest. Again, we have cool little stamp there from the North Pole that Tolkien, it appears that Tolkien drew on there.
And they must have, these would not have been postmarked, right? So he must have drawn like the little swigglies on there for the postmarks, and he must have drawn the postmark, right? Because he wouldn't have gone through the post office. So
yeah, I think he went all out on these.
Did.
He really
totally
did. So
yeah, it's really cool.
So we'll come back to some of the artwork. I'm gonna pause that share here for a minute and stop that. So the letters are written from the perspective of this this fellow Father Christmas, right? As you would think from the title of the book. And they just have the first few don't really have a lot going on. Like it's just kind of like, hey, got your letter, thanks so much, but by 1925 there's this mythology that starts to develop with 1925, and it really expands from there over the next several years. So as far as genre goes, I'm going to come back to some of the characters. As far as genre goes, the letters are obviously fantastical, and we can see how they serve as something of a precursor to the storytelling style we'd see in The Hobbit. While they were not written with the intent of publication, they are written for an audience, and that's his children. And this is interesting because, as we have seen, Tolkien's style outgrew writing explicitly for children during the later parts of this period. And you can see his own style in these letters start to develop into something not like Lord of the Rings or Silmarillion high, but like how The Hobbit develops through the course of the story from the original, the early chapters are a little bit more like the winking asides to the, kid, to the young readers.
Yeah.
Those still exist in the later letters, but as the kids grow older, and even the youngest of the kids grow older, it starts to get less of that.
Yeah.
They're still fun. They're still not like, they don't get heavy or anything like that, but they get a little, they grow along with the kids.
They get a little bit more intense. You could put there's more action.
For sure.
Yeah.
So characters. So we mentioned Father Christmas. He's obviously the main character. He tells, he writes most of the letters. The other major character is the North Polar Bear. Karhu is what we find out his name is. So the North Polar Bear is like the comic relief.
He's hilarious.
He's
absolutely hilarious.
He's really funny.
I was like laughing out loud when I was looking at it today, and the kids were in there and they were like, what's so funny? And then I explained it to them and they were laughing, and and these are like 17 and 14-year-olds. Like they find it hilarious.
And well, it just strikes me too. This is entirely your type of humor, like your type of humor too.
I do love this kind of humor. It's true.
But he's hilarious. And he gets into all these, like he's kind of like the inciting, for all the action that happens, he's kind of like the inciting figure of it, like just because of his mishaps.
Well, he at least gets blamed for it all.
Well, he does. And then the other funny thing about him is he will like make comments in Father Christmas's letters. So he makes these little comments out to the side. Let me see if I can find a good example of this.
He's not a great speller.
And he's not a great speller. Although at first he's not a great speller, or at first he spells fine, and then I think they kind of throw that in there that he's not a good speller, and it's kind of like the the Chick-fil-A cow, right? That always spells like chicken wrong and that stuff, that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yes. And it's cool too, because he uses a different style of writing for the polar bear's comments, because the polar bear has fat paws.
Right.
So his writing is thicker than Father Christmas's. And that's also works, so you can tell like who's saying what. But are you going to share that one? Because that one was a really good example. Well, the polar bear style.
You mean of the drawing of the polar bear?
Yeah. No. I meant of how he wrote, because I was just talking about his fat writing.
Oh, right. Yeah. Here we go. That's a good one. Okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. So P.S. Father Christmas was in great hurry, told me to put in one of his magic wishing crackers. As you pull, wish, and see if it doesn't come true. Excuse thick writing. I have a fat paw. I help Father C with his packing. I live with him. I am the great polar bear. Yeah. So that's like the first appearance, I think, or a second appearance maybe of the polar bear. I was actually gonna refer to later on when he starts to make like the little written asides in the letters.
Oh, like the notes when he actually interjects his own comments into the notes. Yeah.
So let me see if I can find a good example.
One.
Where?
Oh, well, we go back. Like he's written at the bottom there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I can't read what that says right here.
I read it when I was reading it inside.
Yeah.
And basically, I think Father Christmas.
Oh, he says rude.
Yeah, he says rude.
Yeah.
Because Father Christmas makes some comment about either how he can't spell or about his fat writing.
Here's what it is. So and I'm not sharing this because I don't want to like just share the entire book on here, but because you guys should go buy it if you don't already have. You really should. But I think Father Christmas says, I think the polar bear has spoilt the picture rather. Of course, he can't draw with those great fat paws, and then you can. So the North Polar Bear's writing in the edition I have is always bold, and he says, "Rude, I can and write without shaking." Right, so
he's like, burn Father Christmas.
He's making fun of Father Christmas.
It's like my letters might be fat, but at least they're not wobbly.
So this is 1926, and this is still a fairly short letter, but in the coming years, like this is going to be a running theme through the letters, is the back and forth between North Polar Bear and Father Christmas, like kind of cracking jokes at each other's expense.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny. It is
funny.
It's clever.
It is very clever, kind of silly humor, but I mean, it's very enjoyable.
Yeah. So there's actually a lot of characters that are introduced over the years into these stories. Really Father Christmas and the North Polar Bear remain the two most important characters in all of it. They're pretty much in every single letter, and the focus of any action that takes place. Later on, the North Polar Bear's nephews, two other bears are introduced, Paksu and Valkotuka, right? So those are, and they're always, kind of following in their uncle's footsteps, getting into, trouble themselves and, causing problems themselves. We also get a character named Ilbereth, who is an elf and Father Christmas's secretary. So there's this whole group of elves that live at the North Pole, and they kind of do, they're trained to do work and all that sort of thing. So this particular one, isn't it so interesting that this elf is named Ilbereth, right?
Yeah.
So that name, of course, in Tolkien's Middle Earth Legendarium, obviously is a very important name. But this elf, this is not like Varda, right? This character is not Varda. This is a, just a kind of run of the mill, like North Pole elf, who does work up the North Pole for Father Christmas. We have, and then I guess the other big figures in all of this would be the goblins. The goblins, there's several letters where the goblins, basically there's this like series of goblin wars between Father Christmas and the people that, the characters that are with Father Christmas on Father Christmas's side, and the goblins.
Yep.
So,
yep. I think it's pretty ingenious because, it's, I feel like a lot of the, I know you'll come up with themes here in a minute. We'll talk about themes here in a minute, but I feel like several of the letters that I just kind of perused were basically like why the kids, like explaining why the kids weren't getting what they wanted in their stocking. And I think that's like, as a parent, I'm like, that's genius.
It is, because,
you want to avoid them being disappointed, but sometimes you just can't give them exactly what they want for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so this was kind of a fun and creative way to soften that blow a little bit.
I wonder if anybody ever had a chance to like talk to any of the Tolkien kids when they were older about these letters and just say like, do you remember like what was your reaction, or like tell us more about the context of these letters. Maybe there's some biographical details out there that we're not aware of that, could talk a little bit about that. But and of course, Priscilla is still with us. Oh
yeah.
And so, I wonder if she's ever shared, what it was like. Of course, she wouldn't have been around until 1929 and probably not aware enough of Father Christmas stuff until the early 30s anyway.
That's true.
But it would have been great to hear, like, because the Goblin War letters started happening in the mid 30s. So she probably would have been just getting old enough to like start to appreciate those, or have had somebody read those to her and like really appreciate them. Yeah. So I just wonder if like she remembers what it was like, getting those letters from Father Christmas, and if they just how much did they enjoy them, when they got them. Yeah. So they must have enjoyed them a lot. I can't imagine that Tolkien would not have kept doing this every year if his kids did not really find these letters delightful.
Especially considering how much time I'm sure it took.
Yeah.
And it's not like he had a ton of spare time. So yeah, he must have seen it as a good use of his free time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess, and by the way, there's a lot of other characters that come into play. Those are just some of the big characters. I mean, any like major characters that jumped out at you that I didn't list there?
At
At one point, the Man in the Moon makes the
Man in the Moon
appearances a couple of times.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So there's, and I've got notes on all of the letters here. I don't think we're going to go into detail on each one of these, but yeah, I think I hit kind of the high points as far as the characters go.
Most of the main ones, if not all of them. Yeah.
So this is, I think one of the values here is just as there's a time capsule value, I think, to a lot of these. And that's on both like knowing some of the story of Tolkien's own life and the build up. You're like, you read these things and it's like, you start to understand, you're like, man, he really deserved to be like a world-class famous storyteller for the ages, like one of the great storytellers in human history, right? He really, really deserved that. And like you see it like in the young, like in the nascent, I think that's the right word, stages right here of like not even thinking on that level necessarily with these, but he just puts so much into telling of himself into telling these stories, into making these artworks something that his kids would find delightful. And so it makes you think on that level, like, I'm, one of the good guys, made it, right. Like earned it. Right. And achieved, what he should have achieved. Right.
For sure. Yep. Agreed.
And just on that time capsule level too, seeing the kids grow up, seeing John first outgrow like the letters, like Father Christmas, like didn't get a letter from John this year, like it's around like the late 20s or early 30s, like telling the other boys, like, didn't get a letter from John this year, please give him my love, something like that, like really sweet. And it's like you can see kind of Tolkien be like, oh, my boys outgrowing these.
Growing up. Yeah.
We also get this sense of the buildup to the World War II era through this, right? So you think about it, 1920, 2 years coming off the Great War, the war to end all wars, right? A war that Tolkien himself fought in. And then it's so interesting, the Goblin Wars start in 1932 and 1933, just as things are starting to get really ugly in Germany again, right? In 1933, obviously the Nazis come to power. And it was right around that time that the Goblin War started. Now, there's no indication that Tolkien did that deliberately, right? There's no indication to say like these goblins came from, it's not like he's like these goblins came from Germany or a product of the, those crazy followers of Hitler down there, or something like that. But
well, we know how Tolkien felt about allegory, so
well, yeah, but I don't know that he would have not wanted it in this particular thing. You're right, he did feel that way, but I think when he talks about allegory, like he's talking about it in the context of like Lord of the Rings and that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But yeah, there's no indication that he was like trying to like make commentary through these letters either. So he was not, and I think maybe that's more to your point about like what he despised about allegory in a lot of cases was this idea that like I'm making commentary on something through this symbolism, right?
Yeah.
He was not using these things to make commentary to his children about anything. These were meant to be fun letters to his kids.
Just fun. Yeah.
But it just happened to coincide. And so it does make me wonder, like, was he seeing the things going on in the world and he's like, either subconsciously or just like, it's a crazy world and my kids need to learn about the craziness of the world and like how there's bad forces in the world, I
wonder if it might have just been his way of like just channeling maybe some anxiety that he was having about the whole developing situation and just maybe just a way to kind of release some of that tension or just deal with it in the way that he knew best.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, that's all speculation. There's no like indication in the text that there's any of that, but it's nevertheless interesting just because of the timing of it all looking back, right? It's the kind of thing where you're like, you immediately go like, well, isn't that interesting? Just like right around this period is when the letters start getting a little more intense. You actually have wars where the polar bear has to like kill goblins, like, okay, this is getting.
And also his kids are getting older, right?
They are.
So that may have just been a product of what he thinks they would be interested in or what they would enjoy at that stage of their life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we just get a rich sense too through these of Tolkien's sense of humor. Sometimes both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings have plenty of humor in them. But
it's a little more subtle.
It can be in a lot of cases.
Well, yeah.
I think you're right. It's definitely more subtle, and it's not the main point of them, but these are
Right.
definitely meant to be more fun and meant to be humorous, right?
Almost slapstick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, they are funny. I mean, again, he's talking to kids, so it's funny on a kid level. But it's not like, it's not dumb kid humor either. It's like, he obviously, you know, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but basically he was not just like talking down to his kids necessarily either. He was relating to them in a way they could understand. But I'd say in the process, he was also kind of lifting them up a little bit, and just the whole, I mean, again, just the whole back and forth between North Polar Bear and Santa Claus, like it gets really good over time. Just just this, it's the kind of thing that you could see in a comedy routine, being like really, being really funny, really entertaining.
And I think he wanted these to be enjoyed by children and adults alike.
Yeah.
I feel like it was a very much a family oriented project.
Well, yeah. And maybe Edith, I don't know if Edith read them too, but yeah. And I think they're the kind of thing where he wanted to write something. It's obvious he took joy in creating these.
Yeah.
And he was not the kind of guy who was going to do anything unless he was going to take joy in.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I think that was how he was wound a little bit.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Another theme is we see in all of this, Tolkien's evolving storytelling ability. Just he goes from like, oh, here, Mike, hey, John, here's a picture of Father Christmas, and he starts developing. It goes from just these like kind of simple mishap stories about the North Polar Bear, and it starts to develop its own mythology, right? And again, it's not like Middle Earth level mythology, but it's a mythology about the North Pole, like these goblins that keep on attacking. Like, oh, why didn't the goblins show up this year? There's a continuity to them. It's not just like there's references to things that happened in the years before. There's speculation about when things will happen again.
Almost like a series, like a mini series. They build on each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can maybe see him starting to think on a level of, maybe I could do something like this on a larger scale, like for an actual publication, right? You can start to see him, and that's all happening in the mid 30s as he would have been writing The Hobbit.
Yeah.
So, and probably still developing his tales of the first, continue to develop his tales from the First Age as well.
Right. So. Yeah. It's crazy to think that these Father Christmas letters could be could have inspired The Hobbit.
Yeah.
I never they just seemed like such a isolated kind of, novel thing that he did. Like I never thought about the fact that they could have very well been the reason that we now have The Hobbit.
Right. Well, and, we've both been reading Roverandom recently as well. And this also, Roverandom kind of has a parallel path with the Father Christmas letters in the sense that it grew out of a story he was telling to his children for a very specific reason. Right. And now that one was a little more developed into something that he intended and thought maybe I could publish this at some point. But you read Roverandom and you're like, you get that same sense of like the developing, like early stages of thinking like, okay, how can I turn what I love doing into something that could actually be published, actually see the light of day, for the public audience. We see this, I think, just in the theme of like the time capsule, we see this theme of outgrowing childhood. And that reminded me actually a lot of like the Chronicles of Narnia, where over the course of those stories, written by C.S. Lewis, of course, over the course of those stories, the 4 Pevensey kids, they start to grow up and they like Narnia becomes unimportant to them, right? Or they're not really able to come back to Narnia anymore. And I think of like these 4 kids right here, right? 4 kids right here, the 4 Pevensey children. Of course, they're not the only kids that go to Narnia, but they're definitely, it feels like there's a little bit of a parallel there. I don't know if Tolkien's kids were any kind of like inspiration for Lewis, like looking back at all of this, because of course the Chronicles of Narnia would have come out late 40s, early 50s. And Lewis would have been developing a friendship with Tolkien starting in the mid 1920s, that deep friendship. So he probably would have at least known of, and maybe known the Tolkien kids very well. So it makes me wonder, like, was Lewis observing some of this stuff, and that became kind of a thing that he saw, John and then Michael outgrowing their father's stories, right?
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know. That's again speculation on my part. Maybe David Bates wants to weigh in on that one. So anyway, just a little theory that I thought I'd throw out there, but there's definitely this theme of outgrowing childhood. Excuse me. You got to talk.
Yeah, I got to talk. Yeah, outgrowing childhood. It stinks.
Good job. Man, I knew I could count on you. Got a little scratch in my throat. that needs to be a t-shirt right there. Outgrowing childhood. It stinks.
It stinks. Yeah, well, it does. Let's be honest. And as a parent, it's kind of sad to watch your kids like outgrow that that wistful, like, make believe kind of stage of their lives. But I think it's cool that Tolkien kept it going. I mean, so these went from 1920 to 1943, right?
Yep.
So it's like basically 23 years. So by the time, excuse me, he had finished writing, or how old would John have been? He would have been like in his 20s, right? By the time these ended?
By 1943, John would have been 26.
Yeah. And Priscilla would have been?
Priscilla was 14.
14.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, he really he gave it a good run.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's really cool that he kept it going, even when he was like, these kids, they're not, they are maybe outgrowing this, but he really did try to adapt the stories to, to keep them interested, and that it was something that he, just kept going. And I'll be honest, like, I would be shocked if John may have not, like, he may have been like, oh, this is so lame, but like deep down, he would have really liked them.
Yeah.
Because that's what kids do.
He probably took a peek at the letters, as they came in later years, like, oh, it's Dad's Father Christmas letter, and like, even when he was in his 20s, like, was he like checking it out, like, just being like,
there's like a lot of nostalgia.
Dear old
there.
dad,
Yeah.
So yeah. And the last theme I wanted to highlight is seeing Tolkien's own influences, in these letters, especially when it comes to language. Like, just you see his little linguistic notes, like there's like made up languages, like little made up languages, the strange names that, like the polar bears have, right? I don't know enough to know where those names come from. It sounds like some Scandinavian,
or
language.
Norse, maybe.
Right.
He was really into that kind of mythology.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but you see his own influences, kind of popping up here and there as well. So that's enjoyable stuff as well.
Absolutely.
I wanted to make just a few little like footnotes that I found interesting as I was reading through these. 1923, there's a reference made to Lot's bricks, and I was like, is that a toy or something? Apparently, this was a precursor to Legos. They were like, so I found this on the website is Brighton Toy Museum from the UK. Let's see, Lot's bricks. They produced artificial stone blocks in reasonably naturalistic colors in rectangular and wedge-shaped forms from 1918 onwards. The blocks were stacked without any special pegs or joints, relying on weight and friction to stay together. Roofs were hinged pieces of printed cardboard. So yeah, it's like a little predecessor, and it actually calls that out. It says Lots continued until 1960, by which time more modern plastic systems like Lego had become popular.
Okay.
Yeah, so but it makes reference to that. I guess one of the kids had asked for Lots bricks for Christmas that year, and so he makes reference to it. 1924 is the first appearance of the Great Polar Bear, eventually known as the North Polar Bear. Let's see.
I thought that one was hilarious. Can I talk about
the
which
1925
one?
1925. Go ahead. Yeah.
About the North Polar Bear's accident. This is one I was kind of looking at inside, and I was just laughing out loud. And it basically, in a nutshell, the Father Christmas is outside and it's very windy, and his hat blows off his head and it lands on the very top of the North Pole. And so the polar bear, even though Father Christmas tells him not to, is like, I'm going to go get your hat for you. And so he climbs to the top of the North Pole, which is very skinny, right? Like it's a very skinny,
it's an actual pole.
It's an actual pole. It's very skinny, and the polar bear is not small. And so when he gets to the top, as you can imagine, the pole breaks and crashes into Father Christmas's house. Destroys his roof, and the polar bear falls through too. And can I just show people the drawing? Because
how about I pull it up here?
Can you pull it up?
Yeah, let me share it on screen.
Because I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. It's and I thought it was just.
Which year was it?
1925. There's just like so much going on. Nope, not that one. Just so much going on, like just the attention to detail was just magnificent. Come on now. There. Oh, you should buy it. There it is. Okay.
Right, let me share.
Yeah. So I was just focused on like the top drawing, but you can see Father Christmas is like his body language. He's like, no. And then you see the polar bear with like all of his paws in the air, just like flying through. And you see the pole in the roof. And what my daughter pointed out to me, when we were looking at it, was the man in the moon. Like, look at his evil grin. Like,
scary looking.
What is up with that? But it's just so charming and funny. And it just illustrates the scenario like so well. And we were trying to figure out what the deal with that red star is. I don't know.
Let's see. What does this say? The star. What does that say?
Yeah, what does that say?
Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit.
The star went red when pole snapped. That's what it says.
There you go.
So the star. Well, I wonder why it would have gone red.
Yeah, we have to go back. We might have to go back and look at the letter to see.
Letter. Well, maybe we can save that for our next episode. But I just really wanted to mention that one because I thought it was just fantastic.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, and it is fantastic. And one of the things is that he destroys Father Christmas's house in the process, right? And so Father Christmas has to build a new house on top of a cliff,
right?
And that becomes Father Christmas's new house and everything. So that's a continues on into the next several years.
The construction of the
but then Father Christmas's old house kind of remains behind, like the ruins of it remains behind, and it in fact comes back into the story at some point, right? With the Goblin Wars. So fun little detail there.
Absolutely.
1926 with the Aurora Borealis is funny too, and it's that's one of those letters where the North Polar Bear his spelling comes in. No, wait, it's not his spelling. What does Father Christmas refer to?
It's his fat writing. It's his fat paws. I think that's what he says, because that's the year the polar bear refers to him as rude.
Yeah,
because he says because Father Christmas says he can't draw with his fat paws.
That's right.
And then that's when the polar bear is like, actually I can.
Here we go.
Yeah.
But isn't the North Polar Bear silly? And he isn't a bit sorry. Of course he did it. You remember I had to move last year because of him. The tap for turning on the Aurora Borealis fireworks is still in the cellar of my old house, right? So that's the old house coming back into play. But he spells it Aurora Borealis.
But that's
right?
Father Christmas.
That's Father Christmas saying that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Father Christmas can't really spell either.
Well, I guess that's just,
he wanted the kid to be able to.
Maybe he wanted the kids to be able to understand it, or that's like the but little details like that. The North Polar Bear knew he must never touch it. And so there's like a tap in Father Christmas's house that turns the Aurora Borealis on and off. Right. I only let it off on special days like Christmas. He says he thought it was cut off since we moved. Anyway, he was nosing around the ruins this morning, soon after breakfast. He hides things to eat there and turned on all the northern lights for 2 years in one go. You have never heard or seen anything like it. I have tried to draw a picture of it, but I'm too shaky to do it properly, and you can't paint fizzing light, can you? I think the polar bear has spoilt the picture rather. Of course, he can't draw with those great fat paws, and that's where the polar bear says, Rude, I can and write without shaking. And then Father Christmas continues, by going and putting a bit of his own about me chasing the reindeer and him laughing. He did laugh too. So did I when I saw him trying to draw reindeer and inking his nice white paws. And then the polar bear interjects, Father Christmas had to hurry away and leave me to finish. He is old and gets worried when funny things happen. You would have laughed too. I think it is good of me laughing. It was a lovely firework. The reindeer will run quick to England this year. They are still frightened. I must go and help pack. I don't know what Father Christmas would do without me. He always forgets what a lot of packing I do for him. The snowman is addressing our envelopes this year. He is Father Christmas's gardener, but we don't get much but snowdrops and frost ferns to grow here. He always writes in white, just with his finger. A Merry Christmas to you from North Polar Bear, and love from Father Christmas to you all. So, yeah.
So if the snowman writes in white with just his finger, then his writing is basically invisible.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't get any readable notes from the snowman.
Right.
Probably. So that like the polar bear spelling there was actually perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So he's clearly hasn't begun his spelling.
He must have had somebody spell check for him.
Yeah, probably.
Or maybe he dictated it, to somebody else.
Maybe. Well, not the snowman.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have been able to read it.
Oh, yeah, that's true. This was really interesting. This 1927 letter refers to a game called Snapdragons. So I looked this up. What was this reference to? So Snapdragons, get this. It was a parlor game popular from about the 16th century, and it was played during the winter, particularly on Christmas Eve. Brandy was heated and placed in a wide, shallow bowl. Raisins were placed in the brandy, which was then set alight. Typically, lights were extinguished or dimmed to increase the eerie effect of the blue flames playing across the liquor. And so the goal of the game was you basically had this brandy on fire with the raisins in the brandy, and you had to like snap the raisins out of the brandy, right? Of the hot brandy without burning yourself, right? So because I was like, what is this reference to, like, burning? So there's a passage in this letter, 1927 letter, that says his fingers were cold as usual, and the North Polar Bear made him play snapdragons to warm them. Of course, he burnt them, and then he licked them, and then he liked the brandy, and then the brandy gave him lots more. And then the bear gave him lots more, and he went fast asleep on the sofa.
Whose fingers are we talking about?
I think this is the man in the moon.
The man in the moon. Okay.
So it says the man in the moon paid me a visit the other day, a fortnight ago exactly. He often does about this time as he gets lonely in the moon, and we make him a nice little plum pudding. He is so fond of things with plums in. So yeah, and they refer to this game Snapdragon.
So the bear gets the man in the moon drunk,
basically,
on brandy.
Mm-hmm.
That is hilarious, actually, and I kind of want to play that.
Well,
game
this is what
year.
the bear had to say. I have never been expected to look after the man in the moon before. I was very nice to him, and he was very comfy under the sofa. So,
as he would be after having lots of brandy to drink.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, there's a bit of start to introduce a bit of Elvish around 1929. Maramesta, and I think that's I think they call that Arctic in the letter itself, but Maramesta means good journey in Elvish. So, and what we're going to do is we're going to save, we're going to look at some letters in more detail on the next couple of episodes. So next week, we're going to look at the Goblin War letters. So this is 1932, 1933, and then I believe 1937 or 36, 37, somewhere around there. So we're going to look at those. And then there's another letter that that has some it's basically told in like a poetic form, right? That's a lot of fun from 1938. I think we're going to use another episode to look at that as well. So we're just going to do a little Father Christmas theme here during this theme year of Advent 2021, building up to Christmas time. Thought that would be a lot of fun.
Yep.
But y'all go out and get your copy of the Father Christmas letters right there. Well, that's a first edition. You can probably find that, like on eBay or something like that. You maybe find it on Amazon, other places. But there is a second edition, which is expanded, very nice. So I'll link to it in the show notes so y'all can go pick up a copy for yourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, let's see, Greta, I think that was a pretty good episode right there. So
it was fantastic.
I think we're going to call this one a wrap.
Okay.
So
okay,
you all right with that?
Works for me.
We got more Father Christmas to talk about next time. So
Indeed.
all right.
Look forward to it.
I do as well. All right. Well, thanks to our amazing patrons, especially the following: Andrew T,
John R,
Ms. Anonymous,
Redhawk,
Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien,
Shannon S,
Brian O,
Emilio P,
Zeke F,
James A,
James L,
Chris L,
Chuck F,
Asya V,
Ish of the Hammer,
Teresa C,
David of Pints with Jack,
Jonathan D,
Eric S,
Eric B,
Johanna T,
Mike M,
Robert H,
Paul D,
Julia,
and Werty,
as well as those celebrating their patron anniversary in November, Matthew F.
and James.
Well, thank you all so much
Yes,
for
thank you guys.
being patrons. Thanks to all of our listeners and viewers, and we will talk at you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.